Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR, a weekly podcast where we explore the forces shaping our roles today, from new technologies, shifting expectations, to tightening budgets. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell. Before we get going, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Instant Impact, for supporting this episode. Instant Impact happens to be my company, and we're making world-class talent acquisition a reality for SMEs by providing a range of embedded talent solutions, from full recruitment outsourcing to workforce planning and other advisory services. If you're in HR and you're overwhelmed with the sheer volume or complexity of recruitment challenge, then please do get in touch. Visit instant-impact.com, where you'll be able to book in a call. Just specify that you've come in through the podcast, and I'll personally jump on a call to talk through your talent acquisition strategy headaches. Now, on with the show. There aren't any silver bullets in HR. It's multifaceted and dynamic, and I think that's what makes it such an interesting function. I think it's probably the best function in my opinion. However, if there was one, culture would probably be it. The right culture improves productivity, it drives up standards of delivery, it makes it easier to recruit talent, and it makes it less likely that your very best employees will leave. So why is it often seen as fluff? I'm thrilled to be joined today by Ann Hargraves, who's the SVP of Human Resources at TScan Therapeutics. And we're going to be talking about the importance of culture, but then also how to present a really clear ROI to potentially speculative stakeholders. Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to start with a bit of a wide question here. How would you describe culture?
Oh, culture has become one of those words that means everything to everyone and doesn't actually mean an action anymore. It seems to be a thing, and I think that's part of why people think HR is more the fluff department and culture feels like fluff. But culture really is actionable and measurable. And it is not about words. It is not about what you put up on the wall. It's about behaviors. It's about actions, and it's what you accept from people in your organization, right? And what you expect from yourself. So for us, or for me, I should say, our culture is really about the actions and the verbs and what we're doing for each other and with each other every single day, because these are people we spend more time with than anybody else we know in our lives. And how we show up for each other really is what culture is.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think you're right. It's taken on a very nebulous meaning, hasn't it, today? So I'd love to understand what you've done to set a really clear culture in TScan or in previous organizations.
Sure, I can talk probably more recently about TScan, but everything that we do here are things that I've done in all of the other organizations that I've worked for. I think one of the most important things you could do is keep it simple. I've seen companies with lists of values that go down a wall and a half, and nobody ever remembers those. If you walk through the walls of TScan, everybody here will know exactly what our 4 values are. We don't publicly state them because they're something that we live and breathe. They're not something that are for advertising, and it helps us to find the right candidates when we don't put them out there, because they're not unnaturally filtered into interview answers or used as part of their research on how to fit in at TScan. But we keep them short. But what's more important than the word of each one is the definition of each. So each one has a very short definition that explains quickly what that means. And then it has a list of behaviors that would be positive aspects of that word, and then a list of behaviors that may be negative aspects of that word. I think that might be one of the differentiators, because I do believe that every strength is also your weakness. And an example that was given to me a very long time ago, but I think it's a prudent one. So I overuse this one. Maybe that's turned a strength into a weakness. But that if you are somebody who's really good with hammer and nails, and you go in and you're constantly using your hammer and your nail, and then you get to a piece of wood and someone hands you a screw, if you use the hammer with that screw, then you've overused your strength and you've turned it into a weakness. And we tend to overuse our strengths. Same thing happens with a strength as a behavior, a value as a behavior. So when you use them in the wrong way, it becomes something that dilutes your culture or creates a culture differently than what you had anticipated and what you'd hoped to achieve. So having those two sets of behaviors, I think, is a little bit of a game changer.
God, that's fascinating. And how how practical are the statements? Would you be able to give us a sort of an example? I mean, I know you're not publicizing it, and don't worry. I love we need to talk about HR, but Diary of a CEO, it is not. Um, but so I don't think it's going to go massively beyond the podcast. But it'd be great if you could give us an example of a one word, and then some of the examples, just so we can you get a bit more of a practical feel for it.
Sure. The one I always use is drive. Drive is something that will help you get things done, and it gives you a lot of motivation and tenacity going towards the end, trying to reach a goal. But if you are running people over while you're trying to get there, then you're using drive the wrong way. If you're using it as a competitive edge and to be better than other people and always be ahead of people instead of goals and things, if you're using it as an individual fuel instead of a group or company fuel, then that's how you use it the wrong way.
So that's really interesting. So practically, then you've got drive.
Mhm.
What's an explainer sentence, and what for a positive, and what's an explainer sentence for a negative? I'm testing your knowledge of the things here.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, if I'm driving to get an experiment done by Friday, even though it's something that probably shouldn't be done until Saturday or Sunday based on standard timelines, but I work all night and I push and I'm resourceful and I ask for help and I do anything it takes to get it done. I'm creative, I'm resourceful, I'm innovative, I'm motivated. That's the best way to use drive. But if I use drive to get the goal done, but instead of being creative and innovative, I am barking orders to other people, I'm yelling, I am making other people work through the night that didn't say that they would. I could probably come up with 100 other reasons, a lot of different behaviors that would happen there, but that's the drive that would hurt other people versus the drive that pushes you to get it done in a collaborative fashion or in a respectful fashion without actually um, going against some of the other values that we have and how we treat people.
I love that. I think that's really powerful. Do you find that giving those practical examples helps people grasp the values faster?
I do. And, what I think is something that really makes people understand them is we integrate them into almost everything that we do, our values. And I could give you some examples of that as we go on. But also, you see them in action on a regular basis. And as part of a recognition program, that's another place that we integrate our values. When somebody does something that we think is above and beyond, we attach it to one of our values whenever it makes sense so that people are constantly relating that action with that value. So you see a lot of positive reinforcement and demonstration of what that value should look like. And then if you use the value in a way that you shouldn't, you get a very respectful but direct reminder that that's not what we meant.
How important have your management layer been in making this a reality then, Anne?
They're critical, and every single person in this company is critical. If any one person doesn't do it, it weakens the link, right? But it has to start. I mean, everybody looks up to our leadership. I would love to say that it's the employees that created these, and it is. The employees created our values. We had an employee group create them, but they do have to get validated by that senior team because the senior team has to make sure it's something they can live authentically with every day. Because as much as I would love to say it's got to be everybody, and it does, everybody looks up to the leadership team. They look up to them for their career growth, for their decision making, for the way they treat people. Anything that that leader is doing is something everybody else will emulate. So they are critical. They're not just critical in accepting those values and creating the culture. They're critical in living it. Otherwise, it doesn't exist.
So that's great. So an employee group came up that sort of originated the values, and the leadership team tweaked and sort of adopted them. It's how did you find that process? Were you part of the of that of doing that. I'd love to find out more about that.
Absolutely. That was a process that I brought to TScan and have brought to many other organizations. It's one of my favorite things to do because it's how I get to know companies when I would go in as a consultant and even as an employee coming in. It's how I get to know a company. I would interview either everybody in the company if the size was small enough, or select people, randomized to select people, selected through making sure that I had a good sampling throughout the organization, but randomized choosing of people so that it wasn't the people that I thought loved it there, the people that didn't love it there. I wanted everybody. And I would ask them a series of questions that would reveal to me what they thought the mission was, what they thought the value set was, what they thought the culture felt like, and what were the good things and the not so good things about working there, what surprised them. I synthesized all that into a report out for the leadership team and the rest of the organization. And then we pulled together a culture team, and that culture team still exists today, almost 5 years later. And many of the founding members are still there. Several people
Fantastic.
have cycled out just because that's how it was actually intended. And there's a waiting list to get in, and has been since the day it started, a waiting list to serve on this team. But it is a really great demographic mirror of the rest of our organization. So if our organization is 70% science, 30% business, that's what our culture team is made up of. If it's 50% male, 50% female, that's what our culture team is made up of, and so on and so forth. We make sure every level of diversity exists on that team. We brought them all together. I showed them this report out and said, starting from here, what do we think our values should be? Because this is the base set. What do we want to hold on to? What do we want to drop? And what do we think might be missing? And that team came up with our 4 values, those definitions, all of those behaviors, and found really wonderful ways, initial low hanging fruit ways of integrating them with the organization. And our rollout was not just here's what they are, but a few integrations of that. And over time, it is so fully integrated, you don't see it as anything outside of the culture or outside of who we are. It feels inherent.
Fantastic. And do you use that culture group to, I mean, if I had a group like that, I'd probably use them to, stress test business decisions. How's this going to play in the rest of the organization? Or are they purely sort of focused on, is the culture being reflected correctly in the organization? And presumably, is it still the right culture to have?
We use that team for so many things. I always say they're my secret weapon because I have a decent sized team for the size of our company, which is partly why we have the metrics and the ROI that we have. But part of that is because we have this team of 15 people that volunteer their time every week. And they are everything from the recognition program to the newsletter to the mentor program to the holiday party to diversity initiatives. And gosh, I could go on and on and on. We have so many events and so many different things that this team does. There are culture ambassadors for all of our new hires. They all participate in interviews. There has to be a culture team member on every single interview team, and
Wow.
their feedback in the debrief is as heavy as anybody else's in that debrief. So yes, at the end of every meeting, we meet every Monday for an hour. At the end of every one of those meetings, we do 2 segments, and one is new business, anything that we are not working on or not aware of that we should be, and should we talk about it as a group. It could be how people are reacting to what the stock is doing. It could be how they're reacting to a reorg or a new holiday or something that we've changed in a practice or a policy. And that team gives me some of the best information that I'm able to action on a regular basis. And I typically will have a conversation, a roundtable conversation about it to get everybody's different perspectives. If it doesn't come up from that group, I will pose many things to the group often and get their feedback on it. Multiple perspectives that I feel are pretty representative of who are outside the walls. But also, part of their job is to go out and talk to people and socialize the things that we're doing and the things that we're thinking, and come back with what other people really do think. So not only are they representative of a group, they are hopefully the voice of that group.
And I think I know the answer to this question already, but is this something you pay them extra for, or is it just part of
No,
being just an honor?
it is people love being on the culture team. Like I said, we have inaugural members from 4.5 years ago that prefer to stay on the team. Some people have cycled out and then come back in, and several others have either left the group but stayed on as a culture ambassador or on some of our subcommittees. We have several subcommittees, so several people stay on for those. And like I said, we have a waiting list. So at the end of the day, it's an honor of a T-scanner to be on the culture team. That said, we do a nice lunch every so often. I've done 2 years in a row. We won the top places to work for the Boston Globe, which is absolutely an honor. Difficult to do, very difficult to do this early in our tenure and with everything else we have going on. So each of those years, we had a really nice event as a thank you event for this culture team, all members, past and present, because I feel that they are truly one of the reasons our company is able to carry the torch of culture on a day-to-day basis, not just define it, but really carry that torch. And we have a lovely dinner. We have gifts for everyone. Our C-suite comes and thanks everybody. A lot of our leaders show up at that event, and we celebrate with each other. We play games, we give toasts and speeches, and it's a really fun night for everybody. Just a nice thank you for the team.
You know what? I think this is one of my favorite ways that I've ever heard of really propagating a culture in an organization. What I really like about what you've done, Anne, is it's employee grown, which I really think is important,
Mhm.
and it's so practical. You've thought about how you're going to keep it going. It's not just going to be the launch. You've got those behaviors. You've got that team. It just I love how sort of practical and carefully thought through it is. I think that loads of people listening will be able to replicate that in their own organizations as well. So thank you so much for sharing it. And I guess the next question then, and why one of the main reasons we're here today is to talk about. I'd love to find out more about how you're measuring it and how you're building an ROI off the back of it.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, we have several different engagement measures that we look at regularly. We just put our board slides together for our board meeting tomorrow, and the HR slides are in there with a dashboard on all of our metrics. And I can tell you that, maybe you can't always tie it back to one specific thing that you're doing, each of those metrics. And that's why some people think it's fluffy. They're incorrect. I can tell you that with certainty. It's not fluffy. When you don't do it, the numbers show it for themselves. But we track how much we spend in talent acquisition, and that might seem like just a financial metric, but the fact that it's not just the dollars that we're not spending, we have 75 to 80% of our employees come in through either referrals or directly onto our website because of the employment brand we've been able to build. That saves us six figures every year in agency fees. So that's one metric that we look at. Our retention right now is about 97% for the first 5 months of the year,
Wow.
which is astounding, I think, in any industry, but certainly in biotech and absolutely biotech in Boston. So that in itself is a measure. It means we are not only choosing the talent correctly, onboarding the talent correctly, but doing things that are engaging and inspiring, right? So that's our mission, but that is also what the day-to-day experience is, because people need to stay for both. That's the way our leaders conduct themselves, right? That's the way where our promotion rate is high, our increase rate is high, and that's because people are achieving more because they're fully engaged in their job. Showing up and staying here isn't enough. You have to be engaged. I earlier talked about the Boston Globe's top places to work. That is a survey that your employees take. We had over 90% of our employees take the survey. That alone, if anybody's ever done a survey, they
It's
know that
very
that
impressive.
alone is a high engagement metric. But when they took the survey, there were many, many survey statements that they rated us on. But at the end, there were a couple of different statements that the Boston Global say is your real engagement metric. And we scored over 90% on that. And it was ultimately, I love working here. I don't want to leave. I want to tell my friends about working here. And we know that's true because that's what people are doing. Our referral rate is incredibly high. And to have a 90 plus percent participation rate and then have an over 90% engagement measure in that alone, that's a metric you can't duplicate anywhere else. When we have events, one of the things we measure is how many people go, how many people come to the Wellness Expo, how many people come to the outing, how many people come to the holiday party. Because what that says to us is you have formed connections with these people that you would choose to spend your free time socializing with them. And that's a huge metric that I think a lot of people overlook or don't find as important as I do. And but our rate for almost every one of our events is in 80 to 90%. Our outing alone, we've just done an RSVP and we have 95% saying yes, they are coming to the outing as of now. That is an incredible metric. They will not only come, they'll participate, they'll laugh, they'll take photos, they'll upload them, and they'll come in talking about it for days. Those connections are so unbelievably strategic, right? Because those connections are what carry over when they come to work the next day. And when they have a problem in work, when they have a challenge, they're more likely to go across department silos and start talking to the person that they were on a tug of war team with, or somebody that they were on the mini golf team with, or somebody they were on the TScan Olympics team with. And we mix up our teams for every single thing that we do. So you're constantly making new connections. So all of that to me turns into ROI because outside of the metrics themselves, it's wonderful to say, oh, we have a 3% turnover rate or we have a 92% engagement rate, or those are great numbers, but what do they mean, right? The ROI is what is the actual return, right? And the return is that we have less disruption, which means we are able to meet more goals and we're able to meet them faster. We're able to be creative and innovative. We have tribal knowledge that if you had a constantly overturned workforce, you lose. So outside of this, the disruption of flow of work, outside of the cost of replacing these people, outside of the stress you put on those left behind because they're shouldering the weight of missing people, and you create a domino effect. Outside of all of that, that tribal knowledge alone is gold.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I often think that tribal knowledge is sort of overlooked in the cost of having to bring in external talent. You know, you've got how long does it take them to pick up the hard skills, the soft skills required to do the job. But then also, I think the thing that people miss is how long does it take them to learn to be a T scanner, right? How long does it learn? How long does it take for them to feel comfortable in their skin here? And I think that's that and that has obviously huge impacts on their productivity as well. So I'm really glad that you brought that up as well, and it brought to mind a saying which we use here at, well, in my business, Instant Impact quite a lot, which is the little things are the big things.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that event attendance, it's so important. It's so important. It shows you have an engaged workforce, and if you sort of extrapolate that out, actually, it's a sign of something much bigger than just a bunch of people getting together and
Yeah,
doing the
it's a
TScan
key
Olympics.
indicator. It may not be a performance indicator, but it's a key indicator. It really is.
So I'd love to get get your perspective on. I think one of the things that HR and people functions can be guilty of is oversharing on things that we care about, sort of to the rest of the exco or leadership team, and undersharing on other metrics. So I'd love to understand when it comes to culture, what are the metrics that you will share on a regular basis with other senior leaders in the business?
Well, I tend to be an overshare, so I'm probably guilty of that. The good thing is I share the metrics themselves on a regular basis. I have an operations background. I've only been in HR for the past maybe 15 years of my career. The beginning of my career was in operations, so I'm very systems, process, and metrics driven. although my heart is with all of the other metrics, and I'm sure I overshare those, and maybe at the same level that I share the metrics, but I find them really important because it's not about sharing the things that I care about. It certainly is, but it's the why. It's the why I think that is so important, because if leaders understand why those things are important to HR and they believe in that and they share that feeling, then they're able to watch for things, they're able to measure, they're able to add to the value of all of that. And I mean, I have to say, I've been really fortunate in a lot of the places that I've worked that the leaders do care about those things and they naturally live the culture. And if you have the right people, it does happen. You do have to guide culture because it will take on a life of its own if you don't. But if you are sharing the why, and yes, you're right. I've had to learn not to share every little detail of every little what I feel are accomplishments in either getting someone to see something a different way or working so and so and so and so through an argument or a disagreement. And mostly they care about the reorg's happening. What are we spending on payroll? What's our benefits renewal look like? Those are the right questions to ask, and I better have answers to those as well. But there are certain things that happen that I like to share so that they can see when I do bring something up in the future. If I do have a request, if I do have a question, if I do have an issue, they know why it's an issue and they know that I'm not yelling fire and that it's that I see smoke.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's really, I understand that. I think that's really important. It just doesn't come out of complete left field. You sort of
Right.
people really understand what's the context behind things. Well, we're coming to the end of the pod, and sadly, because I feel like we
Mhm.
could talk about this forever. But if you were to give a sort of peer people leader in a small, medium-sized organization looking to really get their culture right, what would your key piece of advice be if they're right at the beginning of that journey?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I hadn't thought about that. Let me see if my quick answer is a good answer. But I would say, particularly in a small to mid-sized company, but in any company, we tend as experts and experienced people walk in and say, "I think this, and this is what I know how to do, and I've seen this work, so let's do it." And I've had to learn to control myself in that way because I get very excited about things. I'm very passionate, and stop and listen and not go in and start changing things or instituting things, even adding things until you understand if those are the right things for that organization and if it's the right time and if it's the right order, because some things really should be sequential. They should build on each other,
Mm.
and not everything you can't boil the ocean. So choose the low hanging fruit, choose the things that will feel impactful, and don't go out and put big initiatives out up front, because once it fails, and every time you try to resurrect it, people will say that didn't work here. So better to go slow and steady, really listen and implement a little at a time so that it feels like a natural absorption of what it is you're doing.
That was fantastic advice, Anne. I think you nailed that on the quick answer. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come and join the show. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoy talking about HR and all things strategy anytime. So thank you so much.
Excellent.